Hey everyone, I'm Coach Wolverine.
Coach Colonna here.
And today we are talking about, what did you just say? It was embarrassment, but what was the question?
Are you afraid of being embarrassed?
Are you afraid of being embarrassed? Yeah, I completely foobarred that one. So, are you afraid of being embarrassed?
Absolutely, being embarrassed sucks.
It does. Yeah, I don't like being embarrassed either. When's the last time that you were your most embarrassed?
For me, it's kind of a big overlapping things. It's I let parts of myself go to basically just appease someone else in a situation. So biggest thing is I let foundation pieces of me, like even things that I teach clients and stuff, like not putting yourself first, sliding on your goals, whether it's fitness or otherwise, not holding yourself to your own standards in order to align with someone else who ultimately doesn't align with you or doesn't compliment you in a way that it is. And I would look at that now as embarrassing. Was that something that I talk to people about? Yes. I've had a conversation with you and a couple other people about it. But ultimately, it's embarrassing for me to admit that I let pieces of who I see myself as and where I'm at as well. So that's like the biggest, most recent. The other big one I've touched on before was kind of what kicked off me getting back in shape and doing all that stuff. I was, at the height of it, 260 pounds, bent over to tie my skates, was huffing and puffing to tie my skates, and looked around and there was a couple other guys in there too. And we were all like, and I'm like, this isn't it, right? Like that to me was embarrassing. I was looking around, I was like, why can't I get my skates done up like I have my entire life? So those are probably two of the biggest ones for me. And I was looking around, like actively looking around. Oddly enough, guess what? Both times, no one cared. So who made it embarrassing?
You did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, there was a few months ago that there's more money going out than coming in. And I actually had to ask for money from my grandmother to pay my mortgage. Now, that's a lot. I don't ask for help. That's a toxic trait of mine. I do not like asking for help, especially when it comes to needing a bailout with finances. But I had to, and bless my grandmother, she was able to follow through for me. Like, oh yes, don't worry about it. You know, grandmothers being grandmothers and help me out. And so I'm super grateful and will always be grateful for that. But yeah, when it comes to finances and needing to ask for help along those lines, it's a tough one for me. It's a big part of my ego and my pride that I have to swallow.
Yeah, I totally understand. I've got a little, basically it was a gift from my parents that sits in an account and I have access to it. I won't touch it unless I have the conversation with my parents first. Mm-hmm. And that's still not like, and I'm very rigid on what I use that for. It's either like, and typically I spend that on courses. Mm-hmm. So like development stuff that's going to yield positive down the road. Yeah. Obviously the intent is down payment on a house or something like that. That's something, every time I ask, I got to like hype myself up to give my dad a call and be like, hey, this is the plan. Yeah. This is what I want to do. Right. But that feeling of that accountability and expectation for people around is not necessarily a bad thing. No. Right? Like being embarrassed or thinking that you might be embarrassed and doing it anyway, that's that discomfort and that growth kind of thing. Yep. I actually have a bit of a story too. I was in, would have been grade, after I moved here, so grade 10 or 11, and this teacher stood up in front of class and said, there's nothing any of you can do or say that would embarrass me. And because I feel that way, I'm confident in who I am and I can go home happy at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. Right? You can say things that are mean, you can do things that are hurtful or malicious or whatever, but basically saying like, I am comfortable enough in who I am that I will not be embarrassed by these kids, like whether or not that's completely true or not, but to have that mindset, like I can't be embarrassed because I'm so comfortable with who I am and where I'm going to go and what I can move forward it's a powerful statement, right?
Well, so to break that down for our listeners, it's because we cause our own embarrassment. So the only way we feel embarrassed is if we place that emotion and that feeling on ourselves because of how we choose to either react or respond to the situation. Nobody else can make us feel embarrassed. And it's an empowering thought, I feel. But it's also a very crippling one, because then when I think about all the times that I've been embarrassed, and just like with you with your skates and looking around to see if anybody's seen you and nobody was looking at you. As a kid, man, like I was bullied so much for my weight. I was so self-conscious that like I was always checking my hair when I first grew my beard, checking my beard was perfect, always making sure like my clothes were done. Like every mirror I walked by, I checked. What a waste of time it was. Seriously, it was. And like now I mean, I care about how I look, of course, but it's not an obsession. And if I could get the time back of all the time I was looking in the mirror of making sure things would be perfect to try and avoid embarrassment instead of just going inside of myself to figure out why am I actually embarrassed? What am I telling myself to make me embarrassed? Like my growing up years would have been very different. Very different.
And mine too. And like I know we've touched on this too, right? Like you had to go through your stuff, I had to go through my stuff to get here. Which is like, I don't think there's anywhere I'd rather be than having the opportunity to share things and to do this. And like, I had someone reach out that I worked with, like coming up on 10 years ago, saying like, hey, I came across a couple of your reels. You're a really good speaker. Have you ever thought about doing that? I was like, absolutely not. I've never thought about doing that. Like I never thought about doing this, right? Like every time we come down here and we sit in front of these cameras, it's uncomfortable. Absolutely. It's not like I'm like looking forward to this all day. Like that's not how this works, but it's something that we do because we have these things we want to share, right? And somewhere someone is going to hear something. And if that sparks them to get another workout in, it sparks them to have a serious conversation with a significant other, friends, family, whatever, then we've done way more than I ever thought we would do standing outside without our shirts on in the snow. Right?
So there even ties into the embarrassment of trying something new. We're not afraid of failure. We're afraid of being seen to fail. How often have you been at home playing a video game, fail something, and be like, damn it, I failed. And you move on completely scar-free. But all of a sudden, if somebody else is there bearing witness to the failure,
it feels pretty bad.
Then it feels bad. So we place that pressure on ourselves, right? So like, let's look at even just doing these. Like I entertained a couple minutes of going back and watching our first videos, and like, wow.
I won't do it.
We're 40 plus in episodes now, and like from where we were awkwardly holding the camera at arm's length, talking in the snow, to now. It's completely different. And then if I go back to my original old content, oh my, like that's embarrassing to look at. But it's my own embarrassment because I placed it on myself. Because we think that we have to show up as an expert right away.
And what the crazy thing is, right, is when you make it or when things get better, people are like, oh, look what they used to do. Right? Look how far they've come. There's this giant gap where it's basically like you're making stuff that's not that good. You're getting ripped on. This is crap. Why are you doing this? These are messages that everyone else is saying. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, I actually really like your video. So, right? So like, but you look at like, I know like you follow Gary Vee too, right? Like go watch his wino videos from when he first started where it's like, right? Like you look at that, then you look at where he's at now. Like the reality is there's this massive gap in the middle where you just have to like eat dirt until someone's like, no, it's good. And chances are it's someone that you didn't know when you started doing these things.
Or you find out it's somebody that you did know and you didn't realize how closely they were watching your content and how much it was speaking to them. I quite enjoy that if somebody approaches me in the gym and they're like, hey, I've been watching your content. I'm like, oh, really? You've been watching us?
I had a girl at work the other day. I was like, oh, I got to go film for this. And she's like, oh, like, what's it called? I was like, oh. And she's like, I think my friend watches that. I was like, she's like 16, 17. I'm like, really?
Cool.
That's awesome. Like it's not something I ever thought or a position where we would ever be in. And like I used to leave these things where I felt like I had to go home and have a shower because it was all sticky and sweaty from being like nervous and stressy and worrying about how I'm saying things and what I'm saying. And like
barring the intro like I did on this one.
Right? But like who cares, man? We know we're gonna come back. We know we're gonna do more stuff. There's things that are pressing and like we're gonna keep doing this.
And how I look at it now is if a person was to watch something like this and make poor comments or rip us apart for their own enjoyment, like...
It's not my problem, it's theirs.
No, it's not. Go, move along.
We now know enough and we've seen enough that like if someone's going to go actively out of their way to rip on someone, without like, and especially if it's coming from like a personal thing, right? Like we know full well if you ever engage in an argument and it becomes personal, like walk away because you won. Like that's something that's like, that's the reality of it, right? If you're angry enough to attack me personally, you're no longer standing on grounds of an argument. Have a nice day. So that's ultimately what it is too. It's like you can talk smack all you want, but if you're doing it personally, then like you're actively wasting time. Like thank you for your minutes.
They're just deflecting their own embarrassment.
But yeah, and for us, it's like, thanks for the views, thanks for the comments, thanks for the whatever, because ultimately all it's doing is helping us. And that's this, I mean, if you want to get into this, the cancel culture type stuff, right? Like when you comment negatively on a video, it's still going to pump out more of that video for you to watch. So like if you are actively engaging with things that you hate watching or that make you mad or make you whatever, you're going to see more of it. And tell me that ain't something. Right? Like,
it's funny. So it's true. It really is true because we see what we focus on, and if we're focusing on things that we want to smut all over, we're going to see a lot more of that stuff.
Which is so funny. It's like, this puts me in a negative space. You know what I want more of?
I'm going to shoot out my negative energy and you get it back, right? There's another example of how energy is a real thing, right? You put out the negative energy out there, you're going to get more stuff that's going to create and circulate more negative energy inside of yourself.
Computer algorithm can't even get around the fact that we get what we give.
Yeah.
Right? Like think about it that way. You give that energy to other people, it's going to come back somewhere else, right? You're sitting there online ripping on people all night, guess what you're going to do tomorrow? Yeah. Have to watch double the amount of stuff that you don't want to watch.
Yeah.
So it's like, just stop, right? The whole lesson of that is, it's like, if it's social media, quit ripping on people that you don't agree with and go either do something about it, create your own content. And I don't mean create content as in like clip it and rip it apart. I mean like create the alternative in a positive manner.
Yep.
Right? I'm not doing this to prove you wrong, because we all know there's no wrong anymore, right? Everything's right on one level or another, whether you Google it or want to talk about it or whatever.
Yeah, everything can be proven right on that Google box nowadays.
Proven right or wrong. You just look up the alternative. So it's like, instead of going there and spouting it, and like the only place that I start back and forth is sports, because it's like, the mentality doesn't change. It's never going to change. It's an isolated environment. Yeah. And like, just stay out of politics, obviously, because that's a disaster. But
yeah, politics is a disaster.
It's fun, but
world events are a disaster, because then it's just shooting opinions at it.
Well, yeah, then you're into that cycle, which we don't need to. But I just think it's funny because, like you said, right? You get what you give, and like, by all means, comment how much you don't like something, because guess what? They get paid. The people that are getting paid to put this content out, the ones on TikTok that are doing this stuff, or like controversy marketing, right? Over the last year, who have we seen blow up over the last year, based on, or last couple years on controversy? You've had the Liver King disaster, right? Controversial everything. Andrew Tate. Biggest controversy social media has seen in whatever. That's not like, it became political, but it's a person who's just decided to be the most polarizing person on the internet. Yep. Right? So, and then that gets content built around him, and everyone has to talk about him because of what's going on. So it's like, whether you like it or not, he's getting paid. Mm-hmm. And the concept of that is like, stop giving attention to things you don't like, because they're going to profit off your attention, your time, your minutes, your energy, your everything. Yep. Stop it. Go put it into something else. And I think that's it, right? Like, embarrassment is designed in ourselves, but like, it's embarrassing to constantly give yourself to something that's not working or that you don't like. That's embarrassing.
It is.
And the sooner we own that, the better. Doesn't matter if that's a video game, if that's a human being, if that's a hobby, if that's something.
So why do you think that, what is the embarrassment trigger? What is when you feel embarrassed, what is the first thought that you have?
Now or before?
Both.
So like, now I get embarrassed when I start doing things that don't speak with integrity or don't move me in the direction that I want to, with like,
I know better thought.
Not even that, like, I'm going to tell you what to do, but I'm never going to do it myself.
Oh, so the practice what you preach.
Practice what you preach, the integrity stuff, right? If I'm constantly putting myself in situations that I would be like advising people to not do, that's going to make me feel embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. because of that. Whereas
I can be on board with
before, it would just be me thinking that other people are talking whatever, and they're going to have an issue with this, so I'm just going to avoid it, and I don't need that. And like, it's not a conflict unless I make it a conflict. I just need to not care.
Yep.
That's the difference of it. But now it's like, if I'm not living in the direction I want to, or heading in the direction I want to, or doing something, whether it's courses, this, that, the other, being positive, being truthful, being upfront, being honest, being whatever, if I'm not living through those core values, then I start to feel embarrassed, which is just me holding myself to higher expectations and higher standards.
Yeah.
That was really wordy, but that's it.
Yeah. It covered my definition of mine now too. So I guess I'll share my past version.
Absolutely.
I gave so much care on what people thought about me.
So much.
In every regard. Every regard. Like, from how I looked, to how I walked, to how I spoke, to what I said, the interests I had. Like, I was a crippling ball of people-pleasing mentalities and insecure, built like a potato.
Do you mind if I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
How did you justify those actions? Because I know for me, similar, right? My justification was, I know a ton of people, and I can fit in anywhere. Is that a good thing? Like, sure, if I utilize that properly, but like ultimately, that's how I justified me being relatively people-pleasing or acting different around different people, whatever.
I justify my people-pleasing because I legitimately felt bad when I wasn't able to help somebody, or when somebody I knew what it was like when I asked somebody to do something and was told no. And I didn't want other people to feel that way, so then I just always said yes, and it was usually to things that I didn't want to say yes to. And not meaning like that I was the yes man of like adventures and stuff like that. It was a, hey, can you help me with this? Yeah, sure.
Always, right?
Because it was a fear on if I was going to need help in the future, nobody was going to be there to help me. And like the interesting thing is like growing up, like I had a lot of, it wasn't hard for me to make friends, but my friends, they would come and they would go really quick. Like I've only had a handful of friends that have been longer than, hell, even a year. Most of the time, most of my friends that I've made have only been for a season or a reason. And like I got a few core friends that have been longer. You know, you've been longer. I got a buddy that lives in a different city who he's been a friend of mine since we were 18, but we don't chat very frequently, but he's still a friend. Outside of that, I have one girlfriend who I've been friends with her since we were 14 or 15, and we don't talk very often. But yeah, like outside of that, it's most of my, as odd as it is to say, most of my friendships have an expiry date. But I've been able to like chameleon myself into all of these different groups. Like in high school, I didn't belong to a specific niche. I was a jock, but I was also friend with the skids, with the preps, with the whatever. I had friends in all of them. I was not exactly a connector of all of these groups of people because I would bear witness to this group making kind of fun of this group, and I would tell them to shove it or whatever, and then I would get blah towards, and then I'd go to this one, and I just kind of like moved around as to wherever, not where I felt accepted, but just like where I guess the good vibes were. I don't know. I tried to be friends with everyone. I stuck up for the people that got bullied and whatnot. Got into a few altercations in school because of that. But yeah, I don't really know, other than knowing that how much I did not like the feeling of being rejected, I didn't ever want to make anybody else feel rejected. I think that's where the people pleasing came from.
Yeah. And ultimately, like, very similar on my end, right? And like I was even thinking about this today. There's good people that would have been great friends had I been able to just accept, like, these people actually want to be my friend. Not like they're just here to be because of whatever, whether it's because I was the party guy or the sports guy or whatever it was. It's like they genuinely want to be around me because they like my company, which was very hard for me to accept at the time. Up until, I would say, probably even in the last few years, I have trouble doing that. And then allowing a relationship to go past what I would call like fringe friends.
Okay.
Right? So like they're friends, but like if they leave, whatever. Which, like, that's not supposed to be, that's the defense thing that we've kind of touched on a few times, is like, if I never let anyone get super close, I never have to feel bad if they leave.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. There are certain people that I did that with. certain, but I know like for a lot of my friendships, and if you are one of my friends, I'm not saying that this is you, but I know in a lot of my friendships, I ended up just becoming that counselor role. So anytime we hung out, it was purely only just for like,
That was the usage, right?
yeah. And so like whenever I needed to talk about me things, or I just want to talk about ideas or doing things, it would always just go circle around to them needing validation. And I know a lot of those friendships, they got very exhausting. And so I had to separate myself from them. But yeah, that was a lot of them. And so some of my friendships were my intentional choice to move away from, and not that they were bad people, just not right at that time.
Yeah, like you outgrow and stuff. But I there's 3 or 4 people where it's like I genuinely feel bad about how I acted. And at the time it was like that's just the way it was, right? Whether I was razzing them too much, and it like now I would look at some of that, like the back and forth with buddies and stuff, as like that's just bullying each other. Right? Like whether it's whatever, like ultimately, unless you're brothers from when you're like 5, you can't do that to each other. So it's and like I'm very fortunate to have a large family and cousins around my age and those things, because like family tends to put up with a little more stuff than friends. Yes. But also like fighting with family is so much worse. So you've got that, but I mean they're like I can actively pinpoint 4 or 5 people that I'm like I genuinely feel bad that I'm not friends with them anymore, and it's more than likely because of I
have a couple like that, right? Where it's we were too busy watering the fake plants instead of the real ones.
Yeah, and it was always like it was the shiny thing drawer, or the box, as you want to say, right? Like there was always like maybe at some point you were like, I'll go hang out with this group. It's more fun, rather than to put the energy where it should have went. But ultimately, right, you have to go through that, and you have to acknowledge that, and you have to own that that's your fault. Right? It's not bad to say like, hey, it's my fault.
Yeah, being embarrassed isn't always a bad thing either. Being embarrassed, it's a trigger. Not a I'm triggered trigger. It's a check engine lights type deal of like, oh, I feel embarrassed about this. Where do I need to self-examine and explore and kind of, color in the lines?
Something's going on. And surrounding yourself with people that can recognize when you're embarrassed and push you through that is so important. Right, like having a conversation, like an honest conversation. I know we've had some about my situation and stuff where I'm like, dude, like, is this normal to feel this way? Like, is this okay? Right? Like, is this a thing? And he's like, yeah. And I know specifically, we had a couple chats, and you're like, absolutely. And I was like,
you've grounded me more times than I can count, honestly.
Right. So like we have that, right, which is moving forward. But we would have never got there if we didn't put the energy in or like commit to be like, hey, like let's just do this.
Yeah. It's sitting in that discomfort of I'm embarrassed and let's figure out why.
We could have actively kept having these conversations when I just popped into the store and never put it on camera, never been here, never anything, but we both came up with an idea, we committed to it, we got uncomfortable as all hell 40, 50, 60 times, and by the time it's going to be done, here we are. So it's just like, again, it's a small micro thing, but that's happening everywhere. That's happening in every relationship you're in, interactions you're in. Like if you genuinely have fun and have a really good conversation with someone, and you're like, hey, like, do you want to go for coffee? And I don't mean like in a romantic sense. I just mean like in a sense of like, hey, this conversation was very stimulating. I would like to continue having a conversation. Being like, hey, would you like to go for coffee? And if they say no, who cares? You did, like, it's just whatever, try again with someone else. But like you don't get stimulating conversation, especially in person, nearly the way we used to, right? Because of all of our conversation access. But it's just, it's one of those things. Like that's what I would say out of this video. If you're worried about being embarrassed for anything, if it's asking someone out, asking someone to go for coffee, admitting you were wrong, admitting that you've made a bad choice, any of that stuff, do it. And you're only going to be embarrassed for a very short period of time.
Embarrassment is very temporary.
Doesn't last.
It actually is very, very short-lived. And at its baseline, it's a feeling. Like quite literally, it's just a feeling. You know what else is a feeling? Happy. It's a feeling. We don't need to be afraid of a feeling. We're not going to die from embarrassment. We're not going to be physically hurt from embarrassment. It feels uncomfortable.
It's not sweet, but also like you can't be happy all the time. No. You can't be embarrassed all the time. You can't be anything all of the time when it comes to emotions.
But an embarrassment is neither good nor bad. It just is.
It's one of those things.
So just lean into the embarrassment and own that you're embarrassed and figure out why you're embarrassed. And once you figure out why you're embarrassed, you're not going to feel that embarrassment again, because when we explore that part of ourselves, it illuminates the trigger cave that goes on inside of us, which...
Watch how fast walls start falling down.
Yeah. When
When
you
you
start
start
leaning
leaning
into
into it,
embarrassment or owning things that you're embarrassed about, then that thought of like, oh, people are going to make fun of me for this will just disappear, because you're not even giving them fuel to make fun of you for it.
Doesn't even matter. And even if they do, right? They're actively giving you energy and time. Right? Same social media concept, right? Like anyone that's out there watching to tear you down, or going home to rip on you, or scrolling your page to do whatever, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. That's all. Like, they're giving you energy and time. Go take that and use it in a better way. There's no use engaging in that kind of stuff, and like, lean into the embarrassment, lean into it all, and you'll knock walls down. That's it for me, man.
That's it for me too. Please like, share, subscribe, lean into your embarrassment. It's good for you. Cheers.